Before we begin, leave a comment telling morning light filtered through the conservatory's glass panels, casting rainbow patterns across the worn stone floor. Victoria stood in the center of what had once been the Sterling family's pride, now abandoned for nearly a decade. Broken panes let in the outside air, wild vines crept through cracks, and the ornate iron framework had surrendered to rust in places. Yet Victoria saw only potential. She had discovered this forgotten space 3 days after the wedding, hidden behind the manor's west wing. When she asked Jonathan about it, his expression had grown distant. It had been his grandmother's sanctuary, he explained, before she passed away. No one had the heart to restore it, and no one had the heart to tear it down. May I use it? Victoria had asked, her eyes bright with possibility. Jonathan had simply handed her the keys. Make it yours. Now, 2 weeks later, Victoria knelt in the damp earth, her hands deep in soil that smelled of growth and promise. She had spent her savings on supplies, clearing debris, replacing broken glass, and creating order from chaos. Her collection of rare orchids, carefully transported from her family home, now lined newly constructed shelves. Each plant represented years of patient cultivation, of understanding that beauty required time and proper conditions. The silent observer. What Victoria didn't know was that Jonathan watched her most mornings from his office window. He would arrive at his desk before dawn, intending to work, but instead found himself drawn to the view of the conservatory. He watched her move among the plants with a grace that spoke of genuine love for her craft. She would talk to them softly, though he couldn't hear the words. She would touch their leaves with reverence, adjusting their positions to catch optimal light. There was something mesmerizing about her dedication. In a world where Jonathan was surrounded by people who wanted things from him, Victoria seemed content in her own world, asking for nothing, building something beautiful simply because it mattered to her. He began leaving things for her. Small gifts that appeared without announcement or expectation of gratitude. A rare botanical journal she had mentioned once in passing during dinner. Professional gardening tools to replace her worn ones. A heating system for the conservatory so her tropical plants could survive the approaching autumn. Victoria never mentioned these gifts directly, but Jonathan noticed how her eyes would light up when she discovered them. She would look around as if searching for him, a small smile playing on her lips. It became their silent conversation, his way of saying he paid attention, her acceptance saying she understood. The storm that changed everything. The storm arrived on a Thursday evening without warning. Victoria had stayed late in the conservatory, completely absorbed in repotting a particularly delicate specimen. The first crack of thunder made her jump, and within moments, rain hammered against the glass panels with frightening intensity. She tried to leave, but the downpour was too violent. The path back to the main house had become a rushing stream. Victoria resigned herself to waiting it out, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the sudden cold. The conservatory, while beautiful, offered little warmth on such a night. The door burst open, and Jonathan appeared, drenched despite his raincoat. His hair was plastered to his forehead, water dripping from his clothes. "I saw you were still out here," he said, slightly breathless. "The weather report says this will last for hours." "I'm fine," Victoria assured him, though her shivering betrayed her words. "I'll wait it out." Jonathan shook his head, removing his coat and draping it around her shoulders. The warmth of it, carrying his scent of cedar and something uniquely him, made Victoria's breath catch. "You'll freeze. Come on!" But even as he said it, a massive crack of lightning illuminated the sky, followed immediately by deafening thunder. The lights in the conservatory flickered and died, plunging them into darkness broken only by occasional lightning flashes. Conversations in the dark. "Well," Jonathan said with a hint of dry humor, "I suppose we're staying put." He pulled out his phone, using its light to locate an old storage cabinet. Inside, he found emergency candles left from his grandmother's time. Soon, soft golden light filled a corner of the conservatory where Victoria had set up a small seating area with salvaged wicker furniture. They sat together, the storm raging outside their glass sanctuary. For the first time since their wedding, they had nowhere else to be, no escape from each other's presence. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was anticipatory, as though the storm had stripped away all their careful defenses. "Why did you agree to marry me?" Victoria asked suddenly, the question emerging before she could stop it. "You could have anyone. You didn't need my family's vineyard or connections." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, watching candlelight dance across the rain-streaked glass. "My mother was dying," he finally said, his voice low. "She had been sick for 2 years, and her greatest fear was leaving me alone. She believed I worked too much, that I had no real life beyond my companies. She wanted to see me settled before she passed." Victoria's heart clenched. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. She died 3 weeks before our wedding." Jonathan's hands clasped together, knuckles white. The marriage was her final wish. Your family needed help, and I needed to honor her last request. It seemed like a solution that served everyone. "Everyone except us," Victoria whispered. "Perhaps." Jonathan turned to look at her, his gray eyes reflecting candlelight. "But I'm beginning to think that might not be entirely true." Unveiling hidden truths. The vulnerability in his voice encouraged Victoria to share her own truth. "I was terrified of you," she admitted. "All I heard were stories about the ruthless Jonathan Sterling, the man who destroyed competitors without mercy, the billionaire who never smiled. But that's not who you are, is it?" "It's who I have to be in that world," Jonathan replied. "Business is warfare, Victoria. Show weakness and you're consumed. But here, in this house, with you, I don't have to be that person. For the first time in years, I can just breathe." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough in a way that surprised her. "You've changed this place already," he continued. "Not just the conservatory. The whole manor feels different, alive again, like it's waking up from a long sleep." Victoria felt tears threatening. "I've never had anyone see me the way you seem to. My parents loved me, but they saw me as an investment, a daughter to marry off advantageously. You leave me botanical journals like they matter, like I matter." "You do matter," Jonathan said with such intensity that Victoria's breath caught. "More than I expected. More than I knew how to prepare for." The confession hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lightning flashed, illuminating Jonathan's face for a brief moment, and Victoria saw raw emotion there. Not the controlled businessman or the dutiful son, but a man who was feeling something real and powerful and terrifying. The first crack in the wall, "Jonathan," Victoria began, but didn't know how to finish. Her heart was racing, her skin tingling where his hand held hers. He seemed to understand without words. Slowly, carefully, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and devastatingly intimate. "I meant what I said on our wedding night," he murmured against her skin. "I'll wait as long as you need. But Victoria, I want you to know that waiting is becoming the hardest thing I've ever done." The honesty in his words shook something loose inside her. "What if I'm starting to not want you to wait?" she whispered, barely audible over the rain. Jonathan's eyes widened slightly. He released her hand, but only to cup her face gently, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Then tell me what you need. Tell me how to earn what you're not ready to give freely yet." "Just keep being this," Victoria said, leaning into his touch. "Keep being real with me. Keep seeing me. Keep leaving botanical journals and fixed heating systems and all the small kindnesses that tell me you care." "I can do that," Jonathan promised. "I want to do that." They stayed like that, faces close, breaths mingling, as the storm raged around their fragile bubble of candlelight and honesty. Neither moved to close the final distance. That step still felt too large, too permanent. But the wall between them had cracked, and through that crack, something tender and true was beginning to grow. When the storm finally passed near midnight, they walked back to the manor together, not touching but close enough that their shoulders occasionally brushed. At the base of the grand staircase, Jonathan paused. "Good night." "Victoria," he said softly. "Good night." "Jonathan," she replied, and for the first time, his name felt natural on her lips. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Victoria pressed her fingers to the place on her hand where his lips had been. The simple kiss lingered like a promise, like the first bloom of something that had been carefully cultivated in darkness, finally ready to reach toward the light. 6 weeks into their marriage, Victoria had established a comfortable rhythm at Sterling Manor. Her mornings belonged to the conservatory, where her orchids thrived under her devoted care. Afternoons were spent in the library researching cultivation techniques, while evenings had become something she looked forward to with increasing anticipation. Dinner with Jonathan had transformed from awkward obligation into genuine connection. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, debating ideas, discovering unexpected common ground. Jonathan had started teaching her about his work, explaining complex technology in ways that made her eyes light with understanding. In return, Victoria shared her botanical knowledge, and he listened with an attention that made her feel valued in ways she had never experienced. Their physical distance had remained, but it had shifted. Now, when they passed in hallways, their hands would brush deliberately. When they sat together after dinner, the space between them on the sofa grew smaller each night. The tension was no longer born of fear, but of anticipation, of waiting for the right moment. That Tuesday morning began like any other. Victoria was in the conservatory, misting her prized collection, when Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, appeared at the doorway. Her usually warm expression was tight with concern. "Mrs. Sterling, you have a visitor. Mrs. Catherine Sterling has arrived from Boston." Victoria's heart sank. Jonathan's mother had passed, but his grandmother on his father's side remained very much alive. Catherine Sterling was legendary in social circles. A woman of old money and older expectations, she had built the Sterling empire alongside her late husband and had very specific ideas about how things should be done. The matriarch's demands, Catherine. Sterling sat in the formal drawing room like a queen holding court. At 72, she remained striking, with silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon and wearing a pearl gray suit that probably cost more than Victoria's entire wardrobe. Her blue eyes, so like Jonathan's but colder, assessed Victoria from head to toe as she entered. "Grandmother Catherine," Victoria greeted, keeping her voice steady despite her nervousness. "What a surprise. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared properly." "Clearly," Catherine replied, her gaze lingering on Victoria's simple dress, and the dirt still visible beneath her fingernails despite washing. "Where's my grandson?" "Jonathan is in meetings downtown. He should return by early afternoon." "Good. That gives us time to talk." Catherine gestured to the chair opposite her. "Sit, child." Victoria sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. Something about Catherine's tone warned that this conversation would not be pleasant. "You've been married nearly 2 months now," Catherine began without preamble. 2 months, Victoria. "And yet I hear disturbing reports from the household staff that you and Jonathan maintain separate bedrooms, that this marriage remains unconsummated." Heat flooded Victoria's face. "With respect, ma'am, that's a private matter between Jonathan and myself." "Nothing is private when it concerns the Sterling legacy," Catherine snapped. "Do you know how many generations built this family? How much sacrifice and duty went into creating what we have? The Sterling name demands continuity. It demands heirs." "I understand the importance of family," Victoria said carefully, "but Jonathan and I are taking time to build a foundation first." Catherine's laugh was sharp and humorless. "A foundation? How romantic." "Let me be clear, girl. You were not chosen for romance. Your family was drowning in debt, facing complete ruin. We saved you. All of you. Your father's vineyard, your mother's reputation, your own future. And in return, we asked for one simple thing, one duty, that women have fulfilled since the beginning of time." Standing her ground, Victoria felt anger rising to replace her nervousness. "I am not livestock to be bred on command. No, you're a Sterling wife, which comes with responsibilities far greater than your personal comfort." Catherine leaned forward, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "I don't care if you love my grandson or not. I don't care if this marriage makes you happy. I care about the Sterling line continuing. I care about an heir. And if I'm not ready," Victoria challenged, surprising herself with her own boldness, "then you make yourself ready," Catherine stated flatly. You go to Jonathan's bed tonight. You do what is required of you. You get pregnant. It's not complicated, Victoria. Women far less privileged than you have managed it throughout history. Tears stung Victoria's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. I won't be pressured into something so intimate. Jonathan agrees with me on this. Jonathan, Catherine spat the name with disgust, has always been too soft, too much like his mother with her romantic notions. His father understood duty. His father knew that personal feelings were secondary to family obligation. I had hoped Jonathan would grow out of such weakness, but clearly he needs reminding of what's at stake. What's at stake? Victoria repeated, a chill running down her spine. Catherine smiled, but it held no warmth. Your family's vineyard is currently operating on sterling capital. The loans keeping your father afloat, the investments that saved your mother from social ruin, all of it can be withdrawn. One phone call, Victoria, and your family returns to the poverty they were drowning in. Unless, of course, you fulfill your end of this arrangement, the breaking point. How dare you? The voice came from the doorway, low and lethal. Both women turned to see Jonathan standing there, still in his business suit, his face a mask of controlled fury. Victoria had never seen him look so dangerous, so utterly intimidating. This was the man from the business magazines, the one who destroyed competitors without mercy, but his rage was not directed at her. Jonathan, Catherine began, standing, I was just explaining to your wife the realities of her position. You were threatening her, Jonathan cut in, moving into the room with predatory grace. Threatening her family, using their vulnerability as leverage to bully my wife into submission. I was reminding her of her duties, Catherine countered, but something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps. The Sterling family needs heirs, Jonathan. Surely you understand that. What I understand, Jonathan said, his voice dropping to something truly frightening, is that you've overstepped so far beyond acceptable that I can barely see the line anymore. Victoria is my wife. What happens between us, when it happens, and how it happens is absolutely none of your concern. The family legacy is my concern, Catherine insisted, but her voice had lost some of its conviction. Jonathan moved to stand beside Victoria, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder in a gesture of solidarity and protection. The Sterling legacy will be whatever I choose to make it. And if that legacy is built on bullying and threats rather than respect and genuine partnership, then perhaps it deserves to end with me. Love's declaration, Catherine's face went pale. You can't mean that. I mean every word. Jonathan's thumb stroked Victoria's shoulder gently, though his eyes remained fixed on his grandmother with steel determination. You will leave this house now. You will not contact Victoria again without my explicit permission, and you will call off whatever financial threats you've made against her family, or I will personally ensure that every business connection you still maintain is severed. Jonathan, be reasonable. Catherine tried, but he shook his head. I'm being perfectly reasonable. I'm protecting my wife from manipulation and cruelty, something I should have anticipated and prevented. His hand tightened on Victoria's shoulder. Mrs. Patterson will show you out. Catherine Sterling gathered her dignity like a cloak, but her power had been thoroughly dismantled. She left without another word, though her rigid posture spoke volumes. The moment the door closed behind her, Jonathan knelt beside Victoria's chair, taking both her hands in his. Are you all right? What did she say to you before I arrived? Victoria found she was shaking, the adrenaline of confrontation finally catching up with her. She said I was obligated to get pregnant, that my family would lose everything if I didn't fulfill my duties as your wife. She made me feel like an object, like my only value was my ability to produce heirs. Jonathan's jaw clenched. I am so sorry. I never imagined she would go that far. Your family situation is secure, Victoria. Completely secure regardless of anything between us. I made sure of that before we even married. No one has leverage over you. No one. Why? Victoria whispered, searching his face. Why did you protect me like that? Why did you stand up to her for me? The truth revealed, Jonathan cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Because somewhere in these past 6 weeks, this stopped being an arrangement for me. I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was watching you bring that conservatory back to life. Maybe it was the first time you laughed at one of my terrible jokes. Maybe it was the night in the storm when you let me see the real you, afraid and brave and beautiful. His thumb traced her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. I'm falling in love with you, Victoria. Real love. The kind that makes me want to protect you from anyone who would hurt you. The kind that makes every morning better because I know I'll see you. The kind that makes waiting worth it because when you finally choose me, I want it to be completely free and completely real. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. But for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. Jonathan, I already have chosen you. I chose you when I started looking forward to dinner more than any other part of my day. I chose you when I found myself hoping you'd stop by the conservatory. I chose you every time I touched the botanical journals you left for me and felt seen in a way I never had before. Victoria, he breathed, and there was such hope in his voice that it made her heart ache. She leaned forward, closing the final distance between them, and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as though they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But then Jonathan's arms came around her, pulling her close, and the kiss deepened into something that spoke of weeks of patient waiting finally rewarded. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Victoria rested her forehead against his. I love you, she whispered. Not because I have to, not because of any arrangement, but because you've shown me what real partnership looks like, what real respect and kindness look like. You've taught me that love isn't something that happens instantly. It's something that grows when given proper care and patience. A new beginning. Jonathan laughed, the sound rich with relief and happiness. Like your orchids. Exactly like my orchids, Victoria agreed, smiling through her tears. The most beautiful blooms come from careful cultivation, from providing the right conditions and waiting for the perfect moment. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it. And is this the perfect moment? Victoria looked into his eyes and saw her future there. Not a future forced upon her by obligation or family pressure, but one she chose freely. A future with a man who had waited patiently for her heart rather than demanding her body. A man who defended her against his own family. A man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved what he found. Yes, she whispered. This is perfect. Jonathan stood, lifting her easily into his arms. Victoria laughed in surprise, wrapping her arms around his neck. What are you doing? Carrying my wife to our bedroom, he said, his eyes dancing with warmth and desire and love so open it took her breath away. If that's what you want. But Victoria, we still don't have to rush anything. I meant what I said. I'll wait as long as you need, she kissed him again, pouring everything she felt into it. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to start our real marriage, the one we choose together. As Jonathan carried her up the grand staircase, past portraits of sterling ancestors who had lived by duty and obligation, Victoria knew they were creating something different, something better. A legacy built not on demands and pressure, but on patience, respect, and love that had been carefully cultivated until it bloomed into something truly beautiful. In the conservatory, her orchids continued their silent growth, thriving in the perfect conditions she had created. And in sterling manner, a marriage that began as arrangement transformed into genuine love, proving that the most extraordinary things in life cannot be forced. They can only be nurtured with patience, watered with kindness, and given time to bloom in their own perfect moment. The end.